Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. This story is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everything you're about to hear is based on federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. Day 12 of the trial wasn't supposed to be anything special. More documents, more routine courtroom business. But when Eddie Murphy suddenly appeared, walking in quietly through a side door, everything flipped. Reporters sat up, the jury leaned in, and Diddy froze. No one, not the press, not even the lawyers in the room, knew Eddie was going to testify, and what he said next, it shook the walls. "I've been silent for decades," Eddie began, "but after what I saw, I had to walk away from Hollywood, and I've carried that decision with me every day since." He was calm, dressed sharp, composed, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, like something too real to fake. When the judge asked him to state his name, he did it clearly. Then, without breaking his gaze, he turned and looked Diddy straight in the face. Eddie leaned forward to the mic. "I left Hollywood," he said, "because I saw too much. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The room went still. He started from the beginning, back in 2006, right when his career was roaring back. New projects, major studios calling, awards buzz. The offers were flying in, he said. "I hadn't felt that kind of momentum in years." Then came an invitation, a quiet call from a high-level producer, just a low-key event in the Hollywood Hills. No press, no official event, just one of those hush-hush, career-making nights. Eddie had heard the rumors. Everyone had. Diddy's private networking parties, where phones were taken and cameras banned, the kind of place where deals happened and masks came off. Eddie was curious, cautious, but curious. "I figured it'd be typical Hollywood," he said. "Music, drinks, the usual fake smiles." But when he pulled up to the mansion, he knew something was off. There was a heavy iron gate. It didn't open until his identity was scanned. Everyone greeting him wore the same black suits. They took his phone and handed him a card. It read, "Only one phrase tonight. Be who you really are." Inside, it wasn't a party. Not really. No music, no loud laughter, just whispers and long stares. "It felt like church," he said, but not in a holy way, in a haunted way. He looked around, familiar faces, big names, athletes, executives, but everyone seemed different, controlled, like they were waiting for something. Then Eddie saw a woman in heels and a man in a silk robe walking silently down a hallway. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't about celebration, he said. This was about control. The prosecutor asked why he didn't just leave right then. Eddie paused. "Because I needed to know. I needed to see it for myself. And God help me, I did." After a few minutes, Diddy showed up. Calm, smiling, acting like they were old friends. He threw an arm around Eddie and said, "Brother, it's about time you came home." Eddie chuckled faintly at the memory. Then his face darkened. "He didn't mean home like Hollywood," he said. "He meant this." Diddy led him through the house like a proud tour guide, not showing off paintings or architecture, but people. He'd point at a guest and whisper, "That guy just greenlit a $200 million movie." Or that one, "He does what I say now." Then they stopped at a heavy wooden door. Diddy turned to Eddie and looked him dead in the eyes. "This is where the choices get made," he said. "You want to stay funny and broke, or you want to level up?" Eddie tried to laugh it off, thinking it was some weird Hollywood joke. But Diddy didn't laugh. He just stared, waiting for a real answer. Through a crack in the door, Eddie caught a glimpse of a camera tripod, not hidden, just sitting there in plain view. "I saw people go into that room looking nervous," he said, "and come out either grinning like they won the lottery or looking completely hollow." Eddie didn't go in. He made an excuse and stepped away to get a drink. Diddy just smiled. "No rush," he said. "We're all family here." That moment was Eddie's turning point. It stopped being a party, he said. It felt like an initiation. When he tried to step outside to clear his head, a woman at the door stopped him. "You're not done yet, are you?" she asked, handing him a drink. And that phrase stuck with him, the experience. He walked back into the lounge, and what he saw next would stay with him forever. Eddie steadied his voice. He didn't rush. Every word felt like it had weight, like it had been sitting on his chest for years. He said what happened next wasn't something he could ever forget, no matter how hard he tried. They were led into a back room, a small group of celebrities. The lighting was low, almost theatrical. No music, just soft candlelight flickering off velvet drapes. In the center of the room, a long, polished table lined with silver trays. He said it felt like stepping into a scene from a movie. But this wasn't fiction. This was real, and it was twisted. I was there with other A-listers, Eddie said. Some of the biggest names in the business. He hesitated. Then the prosecutor pressed. Could he name one of them? Eddie paused. Dwayne Johnson, he said. And just like that, the courtroom inhaled. You could feel the air get heavier, and then Diddy walked in. Not like a host, more like a ringmaster, standing at the head of the table, smiling wide, too wide. Tonight's about how far you'll go, he told them. Because greatness, that doesn't come cheap. You want Hollywood? Show me. A tray was placed in front of Dwayne Johnson. It gleamed. A man in white gloves lifted the lid. Underneath, raw monkey brains, still pink, still steaming. Some people in the room gave nervous laughs. Others looked away. But Diddy, he locked eyes with The Rock and said, "Come on, you eat that. The roll is yours." Eddie's voice cracked slightly as he remembered. Dwayne hesitated, looked around, then he did it. He swallowed it and just kept going. Diddy clapped, thrilled. "That's what I'm talking about," he shouted. "Who's next?" That's when Eddie realized this wasn't a party. This was a test, a ritual, and he was next. "I froze," he said. "I looked for the door, but then Diddy walked. Up to him, stood right in front of him, and stared. "You ready, preacher boy?" he asked. Eddie shook his head. "I didn't come here for this." Diddy leaned in. "Then why did you come?" The courtroom was locked in silence. Every juror hanging on the moment. Eddie said he didn't run, but he walked out, calm, controlled. "I wasn't afraid of what they'd do to me," he said. "I was afraid of what they were doing to everyone else." As he exited, Diddy shouted behind him, "You'll be back when you're ready to really make it." But Eddie never went back, and after that night nothing in his life was the same. "I told him I was a man of God," Eddie said slowly, "and I meant it. I told him I wasn't going to eat anything. I wasn't going to sign anything. And I sure wasn't going to sell my soul to fit into whatever circle that was." He looked at the jury, and that's when Diddy made it clear. If you don't play the game plays you. Eddie described what happened next like it was a slow-motion car crash. He wasn't physically attacked. He wasn't publicly called out. He was erased. "The way he laughed at me," Eddie said, shaking his head. He turned to the room and said, "Look at this church boy. Thinks Faith's gonna book him a franchise." Laughter followed. Not joyful, not friendly. It was nervous, sharp, forced. "I wasn't embarrassed," Eddie said. "I was disgusted. That party, it wasn't about loyalty. It was about desperation." From that moment forward, he knew something had changed. Not just in that room, but in his entire career. "I didn't just walk out of a party," he said. "I walked out of Hollywood's inner circle, the part nobody talks about, the one behind the velvet curtain, where shame is currency and silence is traded like stock." And the impact was immediate. Over the next few months, things started vanishing, one opportunity at a time. Projects shelved, roles recast. His longtime agent stopped returning calls, meetings were cancelled, promises were broken, and producers who once praised his name, suddenly going in a different direction. One exec reportedly told someone, behind closed doors, he's not aligned anymore. Eddie looked straight ahead and repeated it. Aligned with what, exactly? Then he answered his own question. Aligned with Diddy? With monkey brains and candlelit rituals? His voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. The pain in it said everything. They didn't need to cancel me, he said. They just needed to stop calling. And that's exactly what happened. For months, then years. He said he kept trying, wrote scripts, pitched ideas, tried voiceover. Work. But something had shifted, something invisible and unspoken. People smiled at meetings, said the right things, but nothing stuck, he said. It's like I was floating just outside the gates. And then he said the line that brought a chill to the room. You don't have to sell your soul in Hollywood, but if you don't, they'll convince everyone you never had one to begin with. When asked directly if he believed he was blacklisted after walking out of Diddy's party, Eddie Murphy didn't even blink. "Yes," he said, and not in some dramatic, headline-grabbing way. In the quietest, most surgical way you can imagine, he explained that in Hollywood, they don't send you a letter. They don't make a public spectacle. The blacklist doesn't wear a name tag. It wears a smile. It shakes your hand while it's crossing your name off every call sheet in town. There's no big scene, he said, just silence. He described how suddenly projects he was attached to disappeared. Studio meetings dried up. People who used to laugh at his jokes stopped calling back. His agent of 7 years, gone without a word. And one of the most painful shifts came when a long-time producer, someone who had once fought for him, quietly told a colleague, "Eddie didn't pass the test." Murphy's voice grew sharper. "What test?" he asked. "The test of eating monkey brains in front of a crowd, of trading my dignity for a role? If that's the standard, then maybe I failed. But I did it with my soul intact." The prosecution asked what that kind of silence does to a man. Eddie leaned forward. "It dissolves you," he said, "not overnight, bit by bit. You feel it every time a door doesn't open, every time you hear not the right fit. And deep down, you know, it's not about fit, it's about obedience." Then came the bombshell. "There's a list," Eddie said. "It's not written down, but everyone in this industry knows it. The people you don't cross, the names you don't question, because if you do, you're done." The gallery froze. The judge narrowed his eyes. The prosecution asked him to clarify. Was he speculating? "No, Your Honor," Eddie replied firmly. "I'm not speculating, I lived it." He went on. "Diddy's on that list. Tyler Perry is on that list. Oprah Winfrey helped write it." You could hear gasps ripple through the courtroom. Some jurors shifted in their seats. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Eddie wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The truth did the screaming. He explained that this so-called list wasn't a physical document. It was a boundary, invisible, unspoken, enforced through nods and side eyes and phone calls made behind closed doors. It was a code, and once you broke it, there was no coming back. He said people would whisper, "You know he's not aligned," or worse. He said no when he was supposed to say yes. That was all it took. The prosecution entered into evidence a series of studio emails where Eddie's name was flagged with notes like "not aligned" and "pass for now." The judge allowed the exhibit, and the jury saw what erasure looks like in Tinseltown. "You want to know how the blacklist works?" Eddie asked. "It doesn't need to fire you. It just forgets you." He told the jury about a fellow actor, once a close friend, who pulled him aside after the infamous party and said, "You're crossing the line, man. They don't come back for people who cross it." They hadn't spoken since. "That's the price," Eddie said. "Speak the truth. Lose your circle." He submitted text messages, voicemails, and call logs showing how relationships shifted, the difference in tone, the ghosting, the sudden coldness. "They don't slam doors," he said. "They just stop opening them." And then he said something that cracked through the courtroom like a whip. "You think Diddy did all this alone?" "No," Eddie continued, his voice tightening. "He had help. He had protection. He had a whole damn network." That was the real bombshell. "This isn't just about what happened in that house," he said. "It's about how many people kept it quiet, how many people signed checks to make it disappear, how many people built empires while others were being silenced." He glanced toward the jury, his voice lowering just slightly. "Diddy didn't just run parties. He ran people, and he ran them with fear, with leverage, with secrets." He paused, letting the silence land. "There were directors at those parties, studio heads, influencers, people you'd never expect, but somehow they were all connected to him. And for years," he said, "nobody said a word, because when you criticize someone on that list," he said, "you don't just risk a job, you risk your legacy." The prosecution asked if anyone ever told him not to talk about it. Eddie nodded. "I had a dinner with a very powerful man in the industry. I brought up the party. He put his fork down and said, 'You want to work again, or you want to talk about that?' The courtroom sat in stunned silence, and that's when Eddie closed this part of his testimony with a final line, one that struck deep. "Hollywood doesn't just make movies," he said. "It makes myths, and the biggest myth of all, that it's about talent. It's not. It's about compliance. And once you stop complying, you stop existing." As the courtroom sat in stunned stillness, the prosecution shifted the tone. They asked Eddie a more personal question, not about Hollywood, not about Diddy, but about him. "How did this affect you, Mr. Murphy?" "Personally." Eddie didn't answer right away. He stared ahead, eyes locked on a distant thought. Then he took a breath. "It broke me," he said softly. "Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, a piece at a time." He explained that a career doesn't vanish overnight. It dissolves. One missed call here, one cancelled meeting there, and over time it adds up until you're left wondering if you imagined it all. "I tried to pretend I was okay," he admitted, "but pretending only made it worse." He didn't talk to friends. He didn't confide in anyone. "Not because I didn't trust them," he said, "but because I knew if they believed me, they'd be next." There were days he didn't leave the house. He'd sit in the same chair for hours, replaying that night, not because of what was done to him, but because of what he saw done to others. The fear in their eyes, the fake smiles, the people who thought they had no choice. He leaned heavily on his family. "My kids saved me," he said. "I'd hear them laughing in the next room, and it would pull me back. Remind me of what's real." He also leaned on faith, not in a performative way, but like a man reaching for something solid while sinking. "I stopped asking God why," Eddie said. "I started asking him when. When would I speak? When would the world listen? When would truth matter more than money?" The courtroom was dead silent. Even Diddy didn't move. Eddie said he sought therapy, spiritual counseling, not to erase what he saw, but to process it. "I kept asking myself, should I have done more? Should I have pulled someone out with me? Should I have shouted instead of walked away?" He turned slightly toward Diddy. "But now I know. The most dangerous thing I could have done was stay silent, and I stayed silent for too long." The prosecution asked him why he never went public. No book, no tell-all, no interview. Eddie's response came with a bitter smile. "Because the people who own the microphones are the same people who own the secrets." Then he said the thing that really hit everyone. "I lost the spotlight, but I found my peace. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was playing a role that mattered. A man finally free from the lie." The prosecutor approached slowly. "Mr. Murphy, why now? Why speak today, after all this time?" Eddie exhaled. The question hung in the air like smoke. "Because the walls are finally falling," he said. "For the first time, I'm not the only one saying it. And for the first time, the world is actually listening." He said it started with Cassie Ventura, watching her take the stand, hearing her voice crack as she described what she'd endured. "It hit me," he said. "If she could do it, what was I still waiting for?" Then came Monique, her testimony, her receipts, her pain laid out plain and quiet. Then came that resurfaced recording of Prince, a man long gone, warning everyone about this very darkness. Eddie said, "That's when I realized I couldn't sit this one out. Not again. Not while the blood was still wet on the floor." He admitted that fear had paralyzed him. Not just fear of losing gigs, but fear of what they might do to him. Fear that his truth would be twisted, buried, dismissed. "I saw what happened to the others who spoke out," he said. "They weren't just cancelled, they were erased. But this time, the silence had cracked wide open. And this trial, it changed everything. There's a domino effect happening," Eddie told the jury. "And if I'm the next one to fall, at least I'm falling for the truth." He said he watched Diddy melt down in court, watched the defense scramble, watched the media shift, not because of PR, but because people were finally telling the truth under oath. "I don't want a book deal," he said. "I don't want redemption, I want peace, and peace only comes when the truth is louder than the lie." He got quiet again, then added something unexpected. "My kids asked me recently why I stopped acting. I couldn't look them in the eye and say I got tired, because that wasn't true." He looked at the jury. "I stopped because I wasn't willing to lose myself to keep a job. Then he said the line that flipped the room. "I'm not doing this to bring Diddy down. I'm doing this so no one ever has to be built up by him again." The judge called for a brief recess, and as Eddie stood to leave the stand, something unusual happened. Dozens of people in the courtroom stood with him, not because they had to, but out of something else entirely: respect. When the courtroom returned from recess, the air felt heavier. Everyone knew Eddie's time on the stand was almost over, but no one was ready for how it would end. The prosecutor stepped forward for one last question. "In your opinion, Mr. Murphy, what's the most important thing the jury and the public should take from your testimony today?" Eddie didn't answer immediately. He sat back, took a long breath, then leaned forward into the mic. "That Hollywood doesn't run on talent," he said. "It runs on submission. You could hear a pin drop," he went on, calm, unshaking. "It rewards obedience, not integrity. And the minute you stop nodding, stop pretending, you find yourself outside the gates, looking in." He said what happened at Diddy's parties wasn't just an isolated event. It was a system, a well-oiled, carefully hidden engine, one that runs on fear, favors, and forced silence. Eddie's tone sharpened. "I watched good people turn into puppets. I watched grown men eat monkey brains just to get on a casting sheet. And the ones who laughed the loudest, they weren't guests. They were handlers." Then his eyes locked on Diddy. "This man didn't build an empire. He built a trap. And too many of us walked right into it thinking we were climbing stairs." He looked back at the jury. "I could have said something sooner. I should have. But I'm saying it now, because what's done in the dark is coming to light, and all of you, you're the first ones seeing it without blinking." Then came the line that exploded across headlines before court was even adjourned. "Don't protect the pretty lie, let the truth be ugly." Gasps rippled through the room. One juror covered their mouth. Another wiped away a tear. Eddie stood. The judge thanked him. Diddy had nothing to say. His team looked shaken. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His defense attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering something no one could hear. But whatever it was, it didn't help. Eddie Murphy, once the biggest name in comedy, now the most feared witness in court, exited the stand without a single glance back. And in that moment it was clear to everyone, Diddy wasn't just losing a case, he was losing the protection he'd built his empire on. Because the party was over, and this time, Eddie was the one turning off the lights.